12 years ago in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the Louisiana and Mississippi Gulf Coast in August, killing an estimated 1,800 people, causing $108 billion in damages. In September, Hurricane Rita, the forgotten storm, made landfall, causing $12 billion in damages and washing away coastal communities. Rita was the fourth strongest hurricane on record. Katrina ranked sixth. Good morning, I'm Ed James, and this is Black Almanac. Storms and hurricanes are not new to the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast. However, this past week, Hurricane Harvey roared out of the Gulf with continuing rain storms like none ever before, causing destruction sure to exceed that of Katrina and Rita combined. Our guest today, Pastor Jacqueline Bowen, a Hurricane Katrina survivor, Mr. Troy Simon, a Hurricane Katrina survivor, and Mr. Dwayne Lindo, associate producer of Black Almanac, along with Richard Gilmore, a member of the Red Cross disaster units. Well, I'm glad to be able to welcome all of you all here, and maybe can help shed a little light on the misery, if you will, if nothing else, that the people of Texas have been going through, and Mississippi and Louisiana. And I might want to introduce the audience that Pastor Jacqueline Bowen is a Hurricane Katrina survivor, and Mr. Roy Simon is a Hurricane Katrina survivor, and they both live here on the Sun Coast. Mr. Richard Gilmore is a Red Cross volunteer, and he does part of those groups of people who go in when things are really, really bad and try to make them better for all. And Dwayne Lindo is my associate producer, and some of you know him if you watch the station for things other than Black Almanac. You may see him doing his regular reporting. And Dwayne went to school in Louisiana. Well, I don't know how to say this, but I thought that it might be good if you all could share with our viewers what it's like to go through a hurricane, and especially Katrina.
Yes.
Either one of you.
Well, it is very bad because in New Orleans, there's always a storm, and we was always running, trying to run from the storm. And it's a hurting thing where I was blessed to be able to run where there's other people could not run, you know? So the thing about it, even with Katrina, it was the worst that I ever have been in. Mm-hmm. And I just thank God that he spared my family, because from the jump street of it, we wasn't going to leave New Orleans. We was going to stay home, ride it out. Mm-hmm. What you going to do? Are we going to go?
And then when it was almost too late?
Well, when it was almost too late, will you believe we got a phone call about 11:45. And it was a white gentleman on the line. He said, "Get out now." We got the children up, and we only had on what we had, let them keep on what they had, and they took about 1 or 2 outfits. We thought we was coming back. We still in Sarasota.
Well, how did you get out? Did you all?
We had transportation. Thank God for that. We had transportation. So we was able to pack up everything. I mean, the kids and some of our stuff and the dog. We couldn't carry the bird. We had to leave Polly, and the kids were very sad about that. And I think the worst part, where you going? We didn't know where we was going. We got on the interstate. And my husband said, babe, where you going? I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know. I hate to talk about it because it still hurts. Still hurts. And I don't like to look at anything concerning Katrina, you know, because I had plenty of friends, I had church members, but thank God all of them were safe. Some was caught in the midst of the storm in their home. And as we was traveling I-10, and my husband said, well, baby, where? I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know where to go. Running.
But you all were able, you had transportation.
Yes, we had transportation.
And you left early enough, thanks to that phone call.
Well, it wasn't too early because the storm was hitting, what, Sunday?
Yes.
Sunday. We left
Midnight Saturday.
Midnight Saturday. Mm-hmm. If we had not got that call, we probably would have been there. And but we got away.
Mr. Gilmore, you been with the Red Cross for a number of years, and what some folk, I know you were at, did Hurricane Sandy. You went to New Jersey from here. Mm-hmm. But before we talk about Sandy, there are things that have been happening in Sarasota and Manatee counties. St. George's Episcopal Church in Bradenton was open the last couple of weeks as an evacuation in place. Why and what did you do there?
Well, the circumstances for the evacuation at St. George's was the fact that, if you remember, a few weeks ago we had that torrential rain, mm-hmm. and there was an apartment complex where they were at the same time they were doing some roof repair. And so the wind and the rain blew the tarp away, and all these apartments were flooded, and these folks were basically without a place to stay. So St. George's Episcopal Church, God bless them, was able to set up one of their rooms for the evacuees. So we were set up for about 30 or 40 people. There were a lot of initially there were a lot of Haitians that, you know, immigrants that were there that were going to be there, and others as well. And so whenever you have a shelter, you have to have people to supervise the process, manage the feeding and things of that nature, and respond to any issues, register people, things of that nature. So that's how I got involved with St. George's Episcopal. Was there overnight. But the closest thing I personally have to what you experienced at Katrina was going up to Sandy. And actually Katrina was what got me to volunteer as a Red Cross person in the first place. But Sandy was my first real exposure to widespread disaster. And it's amazing. We can talk more about it later on if you want. But
well, Dwayne, I think you covered for the station here some of the devastation, if you have a place to go, here in Manatee County, in the area where the evacuees that Mr. Gilmore was talking about went to St. George's.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. James, thanks for having me on this morning. I really appreciate it. As you mentioned, went to college out there, obviously here watching the events unfold, as you were as well, watching the events unfold, that fateful week 12 years ago. We covered the local angle here, trying to get a sense of who from out of the state of Louisiana was going
Florida
out to
Amber Alert
New Orleans
has been
to
issued
cover
for Michaela
a lot
Fisher,
of
a
the,
black female,
a
11
lot of
years
the
old,
devastation.
5 feet,
American
4
Red
inches
Cross,
tall,
obviously,
130
a
pounds.
huge story
Black
here,
hair, brown
trying
eyes.
to, get
Last seen in the
sense
area of
what they're
1400
going
block
to do,
of
when they're
Elderton
going out
Drive in
there,
Apopka,
and what was the
who was
protocol
last seen
once they
wearing
got
a
out there.
light multicolored tank
And it's
top
very-
nightgown.
I think I should
Michaela
mention
has
this as
maroon
well, that
braids.
New
The
Orleans,
child
as
may be in the
everyone
company
knows,
of
is a
Daryl
couple
Mills,
feet
a
below sea
black
level.
male, 50
So
years
when the
old,
levees
6
broke,
feet 1 inch tall,
obviously
200
it
pounds,
acted
black
as a
hair, brown
bowl.
eyes, who was last
New
seen wearing
Orleans
tan
and
shorts.
neighboring
If you
parishes
have
just
any information
accumulated
about the
all that
whereabouts
water.
of this child,
More than
please
2,000
contact the
people
Orange County
died
Sheriff's Office
throughout
at
that devastation.
407
Over 1 million people
836
displaced,
4357
displaced
or
and relocated
911.
to cities all
Hashtag
over the country,
FLAmber.
specifically Houston. You had a huge number of folks going to Houston. And those folks who are now in Houston from New Orleans are now dealing with the same issues with Hurricane Harvey. So again, it's
12 years later.
Absolutely. So it's a little hurtful to hear these stories where folks are dealing with this second time around. And I knew a few folks who were actually displaced in New Orleans. I went to school in the North Shore area, which is north of Lake Pontchartrain.
Yeah.
So you guys are familiar with that area. But, you know, they had issues after the fact in terms of having to deal with all the stuff, losing their homes, losing all their belongings. So, again, this is something that will be in our minds and in our memories for a long time to come.
Mr. Simon, now, you worked for the police department
Yes.
a little ways in one of the neighboring parishes
Yes.
from New Orleans.
Correct.
And tell us about your experience.
My experience with Hurricane Katrina was working in the dispatch center for a local police department, the Kenner Police Department, which is right outside of New Orleans where the airport is. We had, I was on vacation, got called in on Saturday after leaving Jackie's house. I was called in, they started contraflow where the interstate was only going to run one way, so we had to go into work to be there for the events that were to come. We've had storms in the past and they would always at the last minute turn off. So we just thought this is going to be another passing storm. I had family members that stayed in the area that wanted to stay home. And after Hurricane Katrina passed, the biggest thing was the storm surge, which backed up into the sewer system, which causes the water to rise, along with those levees that broke. And that caused mass flooding throughout the city. I had my mom, she lived in a first floor apartment. She was home with my nieces and my sister. She had to take the lid off of the ice chest and put my nieces in to float them to get to higher ground, which was to my grandmother's house. And they stood in that home for about 6 days until I was able to get a guy and a friend to let me use their vehicles or drive me as well to get to them, to get them to safety. Wading through chest-high water, walking for about 8 blocks, and having to rescue about 11 of my family members to get them to safety, as well as getting back to work in the dispatch center where we received calls of hopelessness, helplessness, despair. It's your worst imagination that you can hear people crying out for help, needing help, and there was nothing there at the time.
What do you do as a dispatcher? What do you say?
We were at a loss for words because we didn't know where the help was, where the help would come from. Even in the Kenner Police Department, we were somewhat put on an island because our streets were flooded as well. And there was very little movement. We didn't have boats prepared for this. We didn't have anything to go out until after the storm. We had volunteers had to come in and assist us with getting to these locations. Guys that worked for the Kenner Police Department used their own personal boats, got to their homes, got to their boats, took them in and start going neighborhood to neighborhood to start searching for those people that were able to be rescued at that time.
Pastor, you said that you all got on I-10
Yes.
and started driving. Some families, I understood, died on I-10.
Well, my family and I, so happened I had a phone book, and it was one of the young ladies that had was going to my church when I had it in New Orleans, and I found her number, and I called her, and I asked her, could my family and I come and stay with her until this was over with, and that was in Memphis, Tennessee. So we stayed there. We got to Memphis and we stayed there for about a week. And I think we was calling you, Minister Troy, and asking, well, you know, when can we go back? you know, well, give me a gun. He said, you can't. He said, bodies are floating. And that was, it was just heartbreaking. But I thank God that this lady opened her door to my family and I. And we was there for a week, and I had this urge to leave. And I was telling my husband, I said, babe, we got to go to Florida. So we left first thing that Monday, headed to Florida. When we got in Florida, we went, stayed at a relative home in Northport. When Northport found out that we was victims of Katrina, the whole city of Northport adopted us. They put us in a brand new home, furnished from the front door to the back door. Took my kids shopping. We had doctor's papers, I don't know how long, if we need to go to a doctor. Gift cards. The people in Northport really supported us. And everybody didn't get that. The thing is, even though we didn't have the finance, because everything was just, you know, we couldn't even get food stamps.
Well, sometimes we all become Americans when there's trouble.
Yes.
Yes.
And as soon as the trouble is over, passes, we go back to being too many of us, to our mean selves.
Yes, yes.
And I'd like to add on to what Pastor Bones was talking about. Everyone in the country pretty much opened their arms to a lot of the Katrina victims.
Yes.
One thing I do have to mention too is many of the colleges in the New Orleans area, actually 2 African-American colleges included, Xavier and Dillard. A lot of those students had to transfer to other schools, whether it be in Louisiana or schools in usually the southeast region of the United States. So a lot of the colleges kind of opened up their admission standards to try to get a lot of these students from Tulane, Xavier, Dillard to come into their schools. And there's an article in the Journal of African American History called Hurricane Katrina Through the Eyes of African American Students, which really needs to be read because you mentioned I-10, a lot of, unfortunately, dead bodies, a lot of devastation. Xavier University is right off of I-10.
Yes,
so some of the
is.
students were stuck right there in the dorms. So they witnessed a lot of this. So, I mean, they went through a lot. Some of them stayed, a lot of them transferred to other schools. But the point is, schools out there open their arms to get some of the Xavier students and the Dillard students to transfer to their schools.
Now, Mr. Gilmore, tell us about Sandy from your perspective as a member of the Red Cross.
Well, that was my first real experience with Red Cross, my initial one. And as you can imagine, it's as hard as it is on the disaster victims, it's just as chaotic as well for people flying in from all over the country, wanting to do something, but at the same time they're trying to organize and get things. So you get there and you're standing around waiting in a hotel that's filled with people because it's the only one that has electricity. They send you to one end of New Jersey, then they turn around and send you to another part of New Jersey. Then all of the political disagreements that can take place, like the governor saying evacuate Atlantic City and the mayor saying no, stand in place, similar to what happened in Houston, is going on. So we were like the first people back in Atlantic City after it was supposedly shut down. So imagine going to Atlantic City or Las Vegas and the lights aren't on. There's nobody there.
Well, I had that experience in Hurricane Katrina. Once the city was dried out and you weren't really allowed to get in, but because I worked for the police department, I had on a uniform and I was able to drive in. I tell people all the time, it's the eeriest, weirdest feeling. I drove into New Orleans, drove down 610, and I decided to get off of the interstate on Elysian Fields and 610. And to pull up to that intersection, there's no red lights. But I sat there in a once vibrant city with life everywhere. There was no one in front of me, no one behind me, no one on side of me. It was almost like I was waiting for zombies to just come running and start charging the car. There was nothing there. Like I said, it was just, you can hear silence in a city that's full of noise, full of music, full of food, and there was the scent of death, I can say. It just was a morbid type smell that was in the air, but there was no life at all. And I never thought I would see that ever in the city of New Orleans.
Well, locally, there was a family here in the African American community who had family in New Orleans, and they were able to get out, and they came, and with no place to go, because where the family here had just a small place, but through the goodness of the Red Cross, they were put up in a hotel. It's interesting, they left all that water, but they were put up in a hotel on Lido Beach. And two of the ladies were nurses, but they didn't have any clothes, they didn't have any of their registrations that says that you're a nurse. And Commissioner Fred Atkins, I can't remember if he was mayor then, but he came to me, and because somehow someone had talked to them about this family with all these kids, and I was able to call then the director of Sarasota Memorial Hospital and say, we have 2 RNs with no credentials. Can you help them with a job? She said, let me talk to them and I can make a call. I guess there's a statewide data bank or something there, and find out, and they found out they did have the credentials, and hired them on the spot out of the conference room here. And then, of course, they didn't have any scrubs, so I talked to management and said, can you, not can you, will you pay for the uniforms for these 2 ladies? And the then general manager says, Ed, you don't have no shame about asking, do you? I say, no, there's no shame in my game. And then the first question was, how much is it going to cost? I said, I don't know. So I said, what I'll do is I'll go with them to the uniform store and get a receipt for them and get the folk in the uniform store based upon my word that ABC 7 was going to pay for them. And they gave me a go-ahead. We did that. They had children need to go to school. What they did, I called the school board and talked to the superintendent of schools at that time. He sent a registrar with a computer here to the station, because we were mobilized in the conference room here, and they plugged in and got the right ages and where they are and said where they would be going. Well, at that point, they were living in you had some middle schoolers and 2 high schoolers, but they were living in the motel at Lido. I think it's the Holiday Inn in Lido there. Sometime later, after things were, they are working now at that point, and we found a landlord, and they were able to move, the Red Cross moved them into this place, and I think it paid for, I believe, the first month, because the ladies were working. And so, what can I say? we can do the right thing, collectively, whoever we are, when it hits everybody. Dwayne, from a student's perspective, you mentioned that the two HBCUs in New Orleans, most of the students had to transfer out to some other place, but they were able to make full transfers in the terms of no one asked them, how are you going to pay for this or whatever. They just took them as a straight transfer.
Absolutely. So, you know, and I have to mention University of New Orleans and Tulane out there as well, on top of the HBCUs, but there are other schools around the country that accepted these students with open arms, obviously knowing what they went through. I think some of in terms of admission payments, tuition, for a lot of students, a lot of that was waived for some of the students because of what they went through. So, I mean, it's really refreshing to hear, again, you know, a lot of these colleges open their arms to some of the students of New Orleans.
And you see a lot of that in Houston as well. I mean, people are coming out from all over. You know, you got the Cajun Navy that's doing so much good work in the area.
The people came, you know, from New Orleans to Houston to help.
Exactly.
And Houston is a metroplex. Almost 3 million people in Houston, unheard of for a city. And then in the whole metroplex in the surrounding areas, you got about 5 million.
Yes.
And somehow, some way, we saw Texans at their best.
Is your mop a dirty, disgusting mess? You need the Hurricane 360 Spin Mop System, the only mop and bucket that spins the dirt away. A system that cleans practically anything and everything with super absorbent microfiber. Dip it in the washer side and the mess releases into the bucket. Then place it in the dryer side and push on the pedal. You get a clean mop pad that's practically dry and ready for more. And your hands will never again touch a dirty, disgusting mop. The heads are washable and reusable. Get the Hurricane 360 Spin Mop System for just 2 payments of $19.99. You'll also get a Sticky Buddy, the reusable sticky roller that picks up pet hair and lint and washes clean in seconds. You can take advantage of our 2-for-1 Pick It Up special and get a second spin mop set. Just pay additional shipping and fee. And we'll upgrade you to free priority handling. So don't wait. Order now.
Call 1-800-394-1524 to get your Hurricane Spin Mop double offer. So hurry and call 1-800-394-1524. Call now.
Download the all-new ABC7 First Alert weather app now.